Welcome back to the Discover Bittensor podcast. Today I want to talk about the missing killer app that Bittensor potentially needs. It's a simple product that ordinary non-AI native people can open, understand, and use, like ChatGPT or like Claude. A product that takes many of the separate services being built across Bittensor and combines them behind one clean interface. Because when most people think about competing with OpenAI or Anthropic, they immediately think about the models. Can an open source model become as intelligent as GPT? Can a decentralized network train something better than Claude? Can Bittensor produce a frontier model? And those are important questions, but I think they miss a large part of why ChatGPT and Claude are so successful. Because they are not just models, they are complete products. When you open ChatGPT, you don't have to arrange a separate company for web search, another one for memory, another one for image generation, and another one for processing your files. You open one interface, you type whatever you want, and the product tries to work out which tool it needs. It may search the web, it may retrieve information from previous conversations, it may analyze a document, it may create an image, it may run code, or it may connect to another application. And the user doesn't need to understand the architecture underneath. That convenience is an enormous competitive advantage because most people are not technically capable. That's just the truth. Bittensor currently works in almost the opposite way. It's pretty funny actually. Across the network, different subnets are building different parts of the AI stack, like Chutes hosting open source models and providing inference. Ditto is building persistent model independent memory. Hippius is building decentralized storage. Dsearch provides live web and social search. Targon provides confidential compute. Liam offers GPU capacity. LeadPoet focuses on sales, intelligence, and lead generation. Video works on video compression and upscaling. Numinous produces forecasts. Ridges and Ninja work on coding agents, and Oro as well, I believe. Score works on computer vision. Red Team works on cybersecurity. Yanes is developing privacy-preserving human verification. Bitcast connects brands with online creators. 404gen works on 3D asset generation, and there are many more. So the individual pieces are becoming increasingly interesting, but the user experience remains fragmented and, quite frankly, pretty terrible. Because the average person doesn't want to understand subnet numbers, miners, validators, API endpoints, alpha tokens, or trusted execution environments. The average person simply wants to say, help me analyze this, find this, create this, remember this, run this privately, tell me what I should do with my life. And that's why I think Bittensor's missing killer app may be an interface that makes the network disappear for normal people. OpenAI's real advantage is integration. So I know there's a lot of hate against OpenAI and Anthropic for many understandable reasons, but I have to admit they have built pretty good products. Yes, the models are very powerful, but their product advantage increasingly comes from integrating many different capabilities into a single environment. A person can use, for example, ChatGPT for work, writing, images, research, personal questions, and project management. Claude can work with files, projects, tools, and external integrations as well, of course. And these companies are effectively building operating systems for intelligence. The user enters through one door. Everything else happens behind it. Bittensor is currently building something more modular. Instead of one company owning the model, memory, storage, search, compute, and specialist agents, each capability can be provided by a different competitive network, which sounds complicated, and it is quite complicated, to be honest. But it could eventually become a major advantage if a product is able to combine those components intelligently. Bittensor doesn't necessarily need one subnet to defeat OpenAI at everything. It needs a product that knows which subnet, model, or service is best for each task. And that's a very different vision. Imagine opening an application that looks as simple as ChatGPT. There is a conversation window, there are projects, the assistant remembers your preferences and previous work, you can upload files, you can select a model when you care about the choice, but normally the product makes the decision for you. You ask a basic question and it uses a cheap open source model through Chutes. You ask a very difficult reasoning question, and it may temporarily use a proprietary OpenAI or Anthropic model. You ask something requiring current information, and it searches through DSearch. You upload sensitive medical records, and it automatically routes the task through confidential compute on Targon. You ask for a sales campaign, and it calls Lead Poet. You upload a large video, and it sends the file to Video, or Video. I never know how to pronounce this one. Or think about asking for the probability of a future political event, and it calls Numinous. Or think about asking it to investigate your software for vulnerabilities, and it uses Bitsec. To the user, this remains one assistant. That's the important point. The killer application doesn't ask you to choose a subnet. It understands the request and assembles the appropriate workflow. I just want to talk about my experience with Ditto, because it was quite an eye-opening moment, I have to admit. I have tried Ditto, and I don't know whether Ditto will ultimately become the dominant Bittensor consumer interface. It's still very early, and some of the more decentralized and privacy-focused integrations remain unfinished, as far as I understand. But it's the closest thing I have seen to the product I'm describing. Because Ditto has a clean, familiar interface. You can ask questions directly inside it, like ChatGPT. It maintains long-term memory. And what's very cool, it allows you to move between models. So you can use inexpensive open source models hosted, for example, by Chutes, while retaining the option to use more expensive closed source models for particular tasks. This separation is important. In the normal AI model, your memory belongs to the model provider. Your ChatGPT memory lives inside ChatGPT. If you leave the product, you often lose the relationship you have built with it. And Ditto is trying to separate the memory from the intelligence. So the model answers the current question. Ditto maintains the longer relationship. That means the model becomes replaceable. So today I might use Quen or Kimi through Chutes. Tomorrow I might use Claude. For another task I might use GPT 5.5. But the assistant still knows that I run a certain project, and it knows all the details of this project. So imagine, for example, this website I run, Discover Bittensor. The assistant, so Ditto, still knows that I run Discover Bittensor, that I write mostly for beginners who discover Bittensor, who start their Bittensor journey, and that I prefer a certain tone, certain voice, and that my articles follow a certain structure. So the user's context no longer has to be permanently tied to whichever company trained the model. Also, another example, imagine I use ChatGPT, and at a certain moment, the US basically bans ChatGPT from allowing foreign users to access the newest ChatGPT model. In that case, I am very limited with my options because all my memory is basically saved within ChatGPT. So if I want access to a better model, imagine in where I live, there is a better model. I can't simply transfer all of my history to this new provider. So let's make this idea more concrete. Imagine that you have received new medical test results. You upload several PDFs containing blood results and correspondence with your doctor. You ask, compare these results with the previous ones, identify the changes, and help me prepare 5 questions for my doctor. This is exactly the kind of task for which an AI assistant can be useful, but it also contains some of the most sensitive information a person possesses. A normal user should not have to understand which model endpoint is private, whether the infrastructure operator can access the prompt, or how confidential hardware works. The interface should recognize that the files contain medical data. It should then say something like, this request contains sensitive information and will be processed using confidential compute. And behind the scenes, it could route the documents to a model running inside a trusted execution environment through Targon or Chutes. The model provider should not simply be able to inspect the raw documents. The infrastructure operator should be cryptographically limited in what it can see. The user receives the analysis without needing to become an expert in Intel TDX, remote attestation, or encrypted GPU memory. For a question about the weather, the protected route would be unnecessary. For medical, legal, or financial requests, it might become the default. This is a simple example, but it captures why modular AI can be useful. The application can select a different level of security for each task. So, another example. Now imagine that you run a small software company. You tell the assistant, we sell privacy infrastructure to medium-sized European accounting firms. Find 30 companies that fit our profile, identify the relevant decision makers, and prepare a personalized introduction for each one. A general LLM could attempt this. It might search the web, invent a few names, produce generic messages, and return information that is partly outdated. A specialist workflow could be much more useful. So Ditto retrieves your existing customer profile because it has access to your memory, sales strategy, and writing preferences. Then Lead Poet searches for and qualifies suitable companies. D-Search collects current information about those companies, their leadership, and recent activities. And a Chutes hosted model analyzes the results and writes the outreach messages. The completed lead list is stored inside your project. The following week, you can ask, which of the leads have announced something new since the last search? The assistant already knows which lead you are referring to. This is not simply a chatbot writing a sales email. It is several specialized services working together. Lead Poet, just today, has announced work involving Anthropic that points towards another possible future for Bittensor. Perhaps Lead Poet doesn't need to build a complete consumer application. Perhaps Claude, ChatGPT, and other large interfaces simply call Lead Poet when a user needs specialist lead generation. And that could be a major adoption route for Bittensor as well. Basically, preventing the need for this, what I call Bittensor Killer App. I still think this is very useful and I still think it should be built, but it's not necessarily the only way that Bittensor's results or work can be brought to the wider world. But it's not the only way that what's built on Bittensor can reach a larger audience. Third example, imagine a small business preparing to launch a new product. The founder says, we are launching a compact home battery for the Swiss market. Help us create a launch campaign. The assistant could first use D-Search to analyze competitors, current electricity prices, government incentives, and consumer discussions. It could retrieve the company's brand style and previous marketing materials from its memory from Ditto. It could use a Chutes-hosted language model to draft the product page. It could generate visual concepts using an image generation service like, I don't know, do we have one? Maybe not yet, I don't know, but I imagine we could have. If a 3D product model is needed, it could call 4gen, another subnet on Bittensor. It could create a short promotional video and use Vidio to upscale or compress the final output, or maybe even another subnet that basically allows you to create promotional videos easily. It could use Bitcast to distribute a campaign brief to relevant creators. Instead of manually contacting individual influencers, the company could define the product, message, and target audience. Bitcast creators could produce content and be rewarded based on verified performance. Lead Poet could then identify retailers or installation companies that may want to distribute the product. One request from the user could therefore activate research, writing, 3D generation, video processing, creator marketing, and business development. That's much more interesting than asking whether one large language model has a slightly higher benchmark score than another, right? Example 4. Imagine an architecture firm using the assistant as its internal AI workspace. The company uploads contracts, building plans, supply information, previous projects, and internal procedures. Ditto provides long-term organizational memory. Hippius stores the files and agent outputs. The firm can ask, rewrite this clause for the new project, but preserve our legal position. Because the documents are sensitive, the request can be routed through confidential compute. The company can switch models depending on the task. A cheap open source model may be sufficient for document classification. A stronger proprietary model may be selected for difficult legal reasoning. The company is no longer locked into one provider for models, memory, and storage simultaneously. That kind of independence could eventually matter greatly to business. Example 5. Consider a small company that has built a new web application. The founder asks, test our login system and API for important security vulnerabilities. Explain the problems in language our development team can understand. The assistant could send the technical testing ask to BitSec. BitSec miners could compete to find weaknesses, while validators assess the quality of their work. A coding model could then explain the vulnerabilities and suggest patches, ridges, or Ninja, or whatever subnet worked on this, could help implement the changes. The corrected software could be tested again. The user sees one clear workflow: find the vulnerability, explain it, repair it, test the repair. Underneath, several specialized markets may be involved. A general model can give broad security advice. A competitive network of specialized cybersecurity systems may be much better at discovering real weaknesses. Another example. Imagine that you are an investor analyzing whether a proposed European AI regulation will pass before the end of the year. You ask, research the current status of the legislation, identify the political obstacles, and estimate the probability that it passes before December. D-Search collects the latest news, official documents, and public statements. A language model organizes the evidence. Numinous produces a probabilistic forecast. The assistant might answer, based on the current parliamentary calendar, coalition positions, and unresolved amendments, the estimated probability is 63%. The largest uncertainty is whether the member states agree on enforcement. And this is more useful than an answer that sounds confident but does not quantify uncertainty. Like, think about a normal ChatGPT answer. It says, yeah, I think it's pretty likely that it's gonna pass, or whatever. That's why you need more specific forecasts. So the product combines current research with a specialist forecasting system. Later, the user can return and ask, what has changed since the previous forecast? The memory layer retrieves the earlier reasoning. D-Search collects new developments and Numinous updates the probability. Another example. Imagine asking, find me the best laptop under €1,000 for video editing, battery life, and Linux compatibility. Include current prices and delivery to Germany. A normal AI model may recommend products based on old training data or generic review articles. A specialist shopping agent, such as Oro, could search actual retailers, compare prices, check availability, and evaluate discount conditions. The assistant could remember that you prefer repairable devices, dislike glossy screens, and want at least 2 USB-C ports. The result would not simply be a list of popular laptops, it would be a recommendation adapted to your actual preferences and current market conditions. This is another example of the assistant knowing when a general LLM is not enough. Another example. A podcaster uploads an old interview filmed in poor resolution. They ask, improve the video, create a short vertical clip for social media, add subtitles, and reduce the website version below 100 megabytes. A generation model creates the subtitles, for example. Vidio handles upscaling and compression. The assistant creates several output versions and stores them in the correct project. Bitcast could potentially help distribute the finished clip through relevant creators or communities. Again, the user doesn't need to open a separate video compression dashboard or understand which model processed the file. The interface turns several infrastructure services into one understandable action. Another example. This architecture is not limited to office work. Imagine a greenhouse manager using an assistant connected to cameras, weather forecasts, and operational data. The manager of the greenhouse asks, why did energy use increase last week and how can we reduce heating costs without increasing crop risk? A weather-focused subnet such as Zeus could provide high-resolution forecasts for temperature and solar radiation. Score, or their product, Manako, could analyze camera footage and detect operational events inside the greenhouse. A model could combine these outputs with historical energy use. Numinous could estimate the probability of frost or a critical temperature event. Or, even better, Zeus, the weather forecasting subnet. The assistant could recommend tomorrow morning's solar radiation is likely to be higher than the current control system assumes. Reducing overnight heating by this amount appears low risk, but the western greenhouse section should be monitored separately. This is not one model magically knowing everything. It's a system coordinating forecasts, vision, operational memory, and analysis. I think there are at least two ways this future could develop. The first is that a new consumer application combines these services directly. Ditto may move in this direction. It might get very big and it might fail. I have no clue. We'll see. Another Bittensor company may build this. I heard that James Altucher is building something that's called Blue Tau or something like that. Basically trying to do the same thing as Ditto, more or less. Or an entirely new team may create even a better product than what these people are building. The interface could compete with ChatGPT and Claude by offering model choice, portable memories, specialist services, and adaptable privacy. But there is a second route I already mentioned. Existing consumer applications may integrate individual Bittensor services. Claude could call LeadPoet for lead generation. ChatGPT could use DSearch for a particular type of social or web search research. A video application could use Vidio. An enterprise assistant could route confidential workloads through Targon. A software development platform could use Regis or Oro. A bank could use Yanes for privacy-preserving verification. In this scenario, Bittensor doesn't replace OpenAI or Anthropic as whole companies, which, by the way, will never happen because Bittensor is not a company, but it becomes infrastructure used by them. And some of these big companies can actually integrate lots of different subnets made and living on Bittensor. And I think this is entirely plausible, to be honest. The internet is full of extremely valuable companies that most end users never interact with directly. People use cloud computing without opening Amazon Web Services. They use payment processors without opening Stripe. They load content through networks they have never heard of. Bittensor could develop in the same way. The network may become successful when people stop needing to know that they are using it. At the moment, Bittensor has a major communication problem. People learn about emissions, validator staking, and alpha prices before they understand what the network actually produces. This makes Bittensor appear more speculative and abstract than it needs to be. My website is an attempt to close this gap, but it's very hard, even for me, to make Bittensor easy and understandable to, let's call them, normal people. So, one successful consumer application could change all of that. Instead of explaining Bittensor through consensus mechanisms and tokenomics, you could just show someone a working product. You could say, this assistant used an open source model through Chutes. It searched current information through DSearch. It remembered the project through Ditto. It processed sensitive documents through Targon. It found customers through LeadPoet, etc., etc. The value would become visible. More importantly, real users would create external demand for subnet services. That demand could attract better miners. Better miners could improve the service. Better services would make the application more useful. The resulting feedback loop is far more meaningful than a subnet receiving attention purely because its token price increased. And today, fragmentation is a weakness. The services are difficult to find, the interfaces are inconsistent, the billing is separate, the products vary enormously in maturity. But modularity can become powerful if it's hidden properly. A vertically integrated company has to decide internally which model, search provider, and infrastructure its users receive. A neutral interface could compare multiple providers continuously. If one model becomes too expensive, it can route elsewhere. If a search provider produces poor results, it can be replaced. If a task requires privacy, it can use confidential infrastructure. The interface should have no ideological obligation to route every request through Bittensor, necessarily. It should use Bittensor where Bittensor provides something competitive. It should use a proprietary model where that's genuinely better. Over time, decentralized services can win more traffic by improving their quality and cost. That's how competition should work. So this vision is exciting, but it's not finished. A serious product has to solve unified billing. Normal users will not manage 10 API keys, several crypto wallets, and separate provider balances. The application should provide one understandable subscription or one transparent usage bill. It has to solve reliability. A consumer doesn't care whether a failed request came from a validated problem or a decentralized provider going offline. The product simply has to work. And of course, Bittensor is super young, so we can't expect this to be the case in 2026. But in 2028, yes, we should expect this to be able to be possible, in my opinion. So Bittensor is often described as a decentralized competitor to OpenAI that creates the image of one network training one enormous model and eventually defeating GPT. And perhaps it will happen. I hope it will happen. But I think the more interesting possibility is this. OpenAI and Anthropic bundle models, memory, search, compute, and tools inside centralized companies. Bittensor can unbundle those capabilities into open competitive markets. Consumer applications can then rebundle them into one simple experience. The model doesn't have to do everything. The assistant only needs to know which service to shoot. Ditto may become one such interface if it succeeds. Blue Tau, built by James Altucher, might become another one. Another Bittensor team may build another one. Or Claude, ChatGPT, or future consumer applications may integrate individual subnet products or services. Several routes may develop at the same time. The precise winner is impossible to predict, at least for me. But the missing product is becoming easier to imagine. It's one interface, one memory, access to many models. Search when necessary, specialist agents when they are better, confidential compute when the data is sensitive, storage that is not permanently tied to one model company, and a competitive network operating underneath. The user asks for an outcome. The product assembles the intelligence. That's when Bittensor stops feeling like a collection of separate subnets. It becomes one system. And when people can use that system without understanding miners, validators, etc., Bittensor will have crossed a very important threshold. So the real killer app may be the product that makes Bittensor invisible. So thanks again for listening to this podcast. If you want more information about some of these topics, have a look at my website, where I try to make all these technical things a little bit more understandable for, let's call them, normal people. No offense to the AI people. And also have a look at Hey Ditto. I believe you can try it. You have like $5 worth of free credits or so to use on tokens, and try it. It's really interesting to see just an example of such a potential killer app. Again, I don't know if it's gonna succeed, but it really made me open my eyes to this idea, and I really hope that they are gonna succeed, because they really seem to integrate lots of different Bittensor subnets. So let's see how they continue to grow over the coming months. Thanks again, and have a nice day. Bye bye.